All right, let's dive in. We're going to explore the next massive revolution in computing. And it's a future that isn't built from silicon, but, believe it or not, grown from living cells.
So, for the last half-century, our world has run on this one simple, incredibly powerful promise. You've probably heard of it, Moore's Law. This graph says it all, really. The number of transistors we could cram onto a chip would double about every 2 years. That's why our computers, our phones, pretty much everything just kept getting exponentially faster and smaller. But as you can see, that beautiful steep curve, well, it's flattening out. That incredible ride is coming to an end.
And that begs the biggest question in tech right now. If the engine that drove the entire digital revolution for 50 years is running out of gas, what's going to replace it? How do we keep things moving forward? This is a huge, huge question.
To really get a handle on where we're going, we first have to understand why the old way just isn't working anymore. See, we're not just running out of clever ideas, we are literally, physically running out of room. Here's the problem. We're now trying to build these things, these transistors, that are just a few atoms wide. I mean, think about that. And at that tiny, tiny scale, the normal rules of physics kind of go out the window. Electrons start doing really weird stuff, like something called quantum tunneling, which basically means they can teleport right through barriers they should be stopping at. That causes errors, it causes leaks, it causes heat. We are smacking right up against a fundamental wall of physics.
So, since we can't just keep shrinking our way to faster computers, scientists are being forced to think way outside the box. I mean, radically different. They're exploring entirely new ways to compute that are based on completely different rules.
And that search has really led them down 3 pretty wild paths. You've got our good old traditional computers, right? Reliable, running on zeros and ones. Then you have quantum computing, which just dives headfirst into the weirdness of physics to get its power. And then there's the most radical idea of them all, DNA computing, which is trying to harness the building blocks of life itself.
And this slide right here perfectly shows you the leap to quantum. A normal bit, it's like a light switch. It's either on or it's off. Simple. But a qubit can be both on and off at the exact same time. It's in a state called superposition. Now what that means is that a computer with n qubits can hold 2 to the power of n values all at once. That's not just a little better. It's an exponential explosion in processing power. They call it quantum parallelism.
Now, quantum computers are incredible, for sure, but they're also super delicate, ridiculously expensive, and really, really hard to build. So, what if there was another way? A way to compute that nature already perfected over billions of years of evolution? What if we could just use biology? And that brings us right to the heart of this whole thing, biocomputing. The big idea here is to basically reprogram the molecule of life, DNA, and turn it from a genetic blueprint into the source code for a totally new kind of computer.
I mean, just think about it. A DNA molecule is a sequence of 4 things: A, T, C, and G. That's a 4-letter alphabet. It's already twice as rich as the binary code of zeros and ones that we use now. But the real magic? It's the density. DNA is an unbelievably efficient way to store information.
Okay, look at that number. That's the theoretical potential. 215 petabytes, that's 215 times million gigabytes of data, stored in a single gram of DNA. That kind of density is beyond anything we have ever engineered. But what's really revolutionary is that we can go beyond just storing stuff and actually make these molecules calculate.
Now you're probably thinking, a soup full of reacting molecules just sounds like pure chaos. And you'd be right. But here's the fascinating part. Scientists can actually model that chaos. This graph shows all the different ways a molecular system can behave. By understanding it, they can find these pockets of stable, predictable behavior, like that area labeled C, and use them to run calculations. They can even harness the pure chaos in region D to organize super complex operations. They are literally pulling computational logic out of biological noise. It's incredible.
So, this is all amazing theory, right? But does it actually work in the real world? The answer is a resounding yes. And its very first application could make one of the oldest dreams in medicine finally come true.
So, picture this. Over a century ago, a Nobel Prize winner named Paul Ehrlich imagined the perfect drug. He called it a magic bullet. It would be a therapy so precise it would hunt down and destroy only the diseased cells, leaving every single healthy cell in your body completely unharmed. For more than 100 years, that has been the absolute holy grail of medicine.
The problem has always been that diseases are complicated. A cancer cell, for example, isn't just one thing. It's a whole collection of different signals and behaviors. So what if? What if you could build a tiny computer that could go inside the body, analyze all that complex information on the spot, and then decide whether or not to act?
Well, that's exactly what researchers have done. They've built biocomputers on the surface of these tiny nanoparticles. Here's how it works. First, they design them with molecular sensors. Then, inside the body, these sensors check their surroundings for specific chemicals. Next, they compute a simple logical operation, something like if signal X is here and signal Y is not here, then, and only then, they act, maybe by releasing a tiny bit of a drug. It's basically a microscopic smart bomb.
And here you can see the actual building blocks they use for that decision-making. Using different combinations of proteins and molecules, scientists can create the biological version of computer logic gates. They can build a structure that does a yes function, acting only when a signal is present, or a no function, acting only when a signal is absent. And by combining them, like you see on the right, they can create more complex logic like AND, which needs multiple things to be true before it does anything.
But here's the million-dollar question. Does it actually work in a living creature? Well, the answer is right here. This isn't a simulation. It's not a petri dish. These graphs show the results from these nanoparticle computers being injected into a living mouse, and they worked. They worked perfectly. They analyzed the chemical signals and performed their logical functions inside a living mammal. The magic bullet isn't just a cool idea anymore. It's a demonstrated reality. The success of these little biocomputers is just a monumental achievement. But honestly, it's just the beginning. The next frontier is even more ambitious, and frankly, it's pretty mind-boggling. And this brings us to this wild new field called organoid intelligence. So if DNA computing uses the code of life, OI aims to use the processor itself. Scientists are now literally growing tiny 3D clusters of human brain cells in a lab. They call them organoids, and they're starting to hook them up to computers. They are building computers out of actual brain tissue. The potential here is just staggering. These biocomputers could actually learn and form memories. The human brain is by far the most energy-efficient computer we know of. OI could be thousands of times more efficient than our best silicon chips. And maybe the most important part, we could use these brain organoids to model devastating diseases like Alzheimer's in a way we never, ever could before, testing drugs and watching the disease happen on actual human brain tissue.
Which leaves us with one final and pretty profound question. We are moving from an age of building our tech out of silicon and metal to an age of growing it from the very same biological stuff that we are made of. So as that line between the living and the computed gets blurrier and blurrier, you have to ask, if our technology becomes biological, what does that make us?